I'm just really inspired when you see people do a thing that's like not good for them, but good for the world. Is a world without shameless or awful people possible?
Ryan Holiday,
one of my favorite authors,
podcaster, a blogger, modern day follower of Stoicism.
10 years from the obstacle is the way.
Yeah, that's nuts.
It's been a decade worth of now getting millions and millions of people into Stoicism.
I've been through some shit in the 10 years. So it feels, it's surreal. Tim Ferriss said to me, he's like, you should treat everyone you meet as if they can put you on the front page of the New York Times.
How do we get better at making it a goal to build a tree, to build a forest of more leaders out in the world?
I think you measure greatness not just on what the person succeeds, but how good they are at helping.
How fatherhood has impacted you from a Stoic's perspective?
Oh, that's a good question.
In the book, you talk about making good trouble.
Like, I think a platform is a responsibility. If you're not making decisions, now you've been captured by the audience. They say it's not a principle unless it costs you money. It takes more, it's just more logistically, like you gotta, I mean.
What's your recording schedule like? Because I know some, like with the solo stuff, you can just probably like hammer it, but like
those I'm way back. Like I usually have a huge archive of, so that's good.
Yeah.
What do we do? Like 2 a week, Dawson? What's our recording schedule? Like 2 a week? We kind of try to batch them here or there, but.
Yeah.
What about you? How many do you put out a week?
One, and we're looking at trying to do more than that though. But it's like mixing in like a whole consulting business with this. That's like the whole other side, you know. But
yeah.
Yours is like, it's kind of cool to see how it's evolved with all the media stuff that you got going on. You know?
Yeah, I think the tough part is you only have like one tube that it goes out.
Yeah.
And we put out a lot of stuff, and so it's hard to know like what is the best. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it would be nice if you could have like separate, like you have multiple feeds, but you just have the one.
Yeah. Well, you've been doing the vlogs on your personal one for the book, right?
We just started that, yeah.
So are you going to try to?
I think I'm going to try to. Yeah, that's a good example. I'm going to try to start a second for more, like, because right now I have like my Instagram, Daily Stoics Instagram. They're a little separate.
Yeah. And Daily Dad stuff.
Daily Dad, yeah. I'm trying to create like a lot of YouTubers will have like multiple channels, so they can put out different types of things.
Yeah.
For that reason.
Yeah, makes sense. Wow.
Sweet. Let's do it. I'm ready.
All right, man. Good stuff. Are we going? Yeah, we're rolling everywhere. Good stuff. Well, hey, first of all, thank you for having us, dude.
Of course.
This is,
you like it?
I mean, it's cool to talk to you on Zoom. This is a whole nother level. So thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is, there's like an arms race with studios, I feel like.
Well, I mean, you've done a pretty good job. It's pretty sick in here.
Well, it's easier in Texas because everything's cheap and big and you have space. But yeah, I thought, so the bookstore is 2 buildings.
Yeah.
And then this one came for sale during the pandemic. And we were like, we had no idea what we wanted to use it for, but we kind of didn't want someone else to have it because we thought we might want it at some other point. So we did that.
Yeah.
And then this was a barbershop before.
Yeah.
And then we decided to do studio, and then it's office space. And then, like, I don't know about you, but I feel like you need like a good background just for Zoom calls at this point, right?
That's
and so
100%.
so it kind of it serves multiple purposes.
Yeah.
And then I've done 2 or 3 audiobooks in here now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cozy. I could see how you.
These look cool, but they actually do pretty well with sound because they absorb it.
It makes sense. So, dude, yesterday was a pretty big day.
Oh, what happened?
I believe it was your birthday.
Oh, it was my birthday.
And it was Father's Day.
Yes.
So I'm curious to kind of transitioning into like the Stoic life, and another year has passed. And I know you often write posts when you have another year that goes by.
Yes.
So I would love to kind of dig into how fatherhood has impacted you now, coming off Father's Day, and another year has passed your birthday from a Stoic's perspective.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I actually think about it more in a shorter time. So a year is like, so much can happen in a year, and you're like, wow, did a year happen? But I think about it like every time my kids just got haircuts, or every time I have to like trim their nails, And it's this sort of, you go, wow, didn't I just do this? You know, and it feels like you did, but you didn't. And it could be a month, it could be a couple of weeks or whatever. But you're like, oh, that's there. You can see the literal growth, right?
Yeah.
And then it's gone. Like you're getting rid of it.
Yeah.
And so there's something kind of wonderful about your kids growing up, and then also terribly sad about it.
Yeah.
And I think this is true with time also. Like I realized, so I turned 37 and I was doing the math, and when I was born, this was exactly half of one's lifespan. Right? Like obviously life expectancy is going up, but per when I was born, this is the halfway point.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of getting to the age that I'm remembering my parents being old in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm remembering when they were having
40th birthdays. Do you remember? I remember 40. I'm over 40 now. 40th birthdays was 1,000 years old to me.
Yes. They're like, they're celebrating birthdays as old people. And now you're that age, which is crazy. I had another experience like this. I gave this talk in Colorado the other day, and it had been in a hotel I'd been in a couple times. Yeah. And I got to the hotel, and I remember it being a very nice hotel. And I get there and I'm walking to my room. It's like late at night. And I go, this is a rundown hotel. Like, this is not nice. And then I realized, like, I first stayed in this hotel like 8 or 9 years ago. Like, that's a lot. That's like an eternity in hotel years, you know? Yeah. And I go, oh, like, it's old. Like, because I've been doing this a long time. Yeah. And you kind of, often, like, when you're coming up in what you do, it still feels new to you. And you still feel like you're getting your footing, you know what I mean? Like, and so you feel young in the thing, but you're actually not so young, and you've been doing it a while. And so that was like a weird moment where I was like, oh, I'm a rundown hotel. Like, I'm a beat to shit hallway. And that was like that was what struck me as I walked down this hall. Like, oh, I've been doing this a long time. Like I've been on the road a lot since I first came to this hotel, but time flies. Yeah. And so it doesn't feel like it. It feels like you're just waking up and doing what you have to do that day, but the time escapes you.
But the crazy thing, I was just talking to Billy about this, which is really cool to meet him because I've read a lot of his work and I like to post. I have some of his stuff in my notes. So I was like, oh, this is cool. But your production has increased. I would feel like you're a prolific producer of useful material, but the quality seems to also have increased while having kids. James Clear and I talked about this, and James like, I work a lot less. Mm-hmm. And now I'm sure whatever he's going to come out with next will be amazing, but you're still able to be a prolific producer, increase quality while having a pretty impactful family life at the same time. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely in tension with each other, but it was weird. I was just thinking about this birthday thing. It's like, okay, on the one hand, I feel like I've been doing this a long time. And the other hand, I feel very lucky because I feel like I'm at like peak capacity. Like there's a, you know, like an athlete, you peak at like 23 or 24. I don't know when you peak as a writer or whatever, but it's probably a little bit later. So I feel good about where I am and what I can do. But what I feel like kids helped me do actually was put sort of boundaries around it, which might seem constraining, and it is, but it's also directional. So if you can do whatever you want, whenever you want it, and there's no outside restrictions, I feel like that's kind of dissipating because the energy can go in all these different directions. The need to be like, hey, like school starts at this time and ends at this time, so these are your core working hours. Is actually really helpful. Just like, ironically, so is this idea of memento mori, that life is short. If you feel like you have unlimited time, that you're going to live forever, if you're aging slower than the average person, I feel like you're naturally going to slow down. I was actually just talking to someone the other day who was talking about asking for an extension on their book. And I was like, I think if you ask for the extension, it's just going to take 2 more months. I was like, it'd be one thing to work all the way up to the finish line and then ask for 2 more months. But if you ask for 2 more months now, it's just going to be, you're just going to continue at the pace you're on. Right. And so, or you may even slow down. So I think one of the things that kids has really helped me with is just sort of focusing it and keeping it really tight. And I more or less work like regular person's hours. I don't do like all-nighters. I do occasionally, more than occasionally, have to travel. So I have stuff that'll take me away, but I don't like, I'm not working till 4 a.m, and I'm also not getting up at 4 a.m. Like I'm working pretty normal hours. I just try to consistently do that at a high level, and I feel like that gets you mostly what you want.
One of the things from Right Thing Right Now, your new book, that I enjoyed thinking about is having a North Star.
Yeah.
And how important that is, and how it seems like it would be obvious, and yet most people don't actually do the work to know what theirs is.
Yeah, they're just kind of they have a thing that they like.
Yeah.
But then like what success is or what they're trying to get out of that thing is ill-defined.
Yeah.
And so there's this philosopher, Rene Girard, he says, we don't know what we want, so we want what other people want.
Yeah.
And this is the theory of mimetic desire. But basically, I think what happens is you end up defaulting to how everyone else is doing it, other people's metrics. Yep. You just do a pretty standard, well, do I have what they have? Do I have more than what they have? And so you end up not really measuring against the things that matter to you, but the things that are either easiest to measure or the things that everyone else is measuring themselves against. And that, I think, can, lead you astray very, very quickly. So you gotta know, like, not just like what your North Star is, it's for values, but then also just like in a more professional context, like how are you actually trying to succeed?
Yeah. What is it for you?
Well, like, I think professionally it's, I like writing. Like, my North Star is writing.
Yep.
So even, I think it was Cheryl Strayed made this great distinction between writing and publishing, which I think about a lot. Like, this is publishing, but what's inside it was writing. And if my North Star is like, am I getting time to write, and am I putting a lot of effort into writing?
Yeah.
That's what I'm in this for. That's what attracted me to it.
Yeah.
If what I'm actually after is book releases, book parties, bestseller lists, book advances, those are not totally unrelated, but they are distinct enough that you're going to drift off the course required to do the good stuff inside. Mm-hmm. And then I think, on a more value level, I think about Stoicism being this philosophy that's meant so much to me, how my larger North Star is making it accessible and practical to people, and being a good steward of the success that I've been lucky enough to have as a result of it. Because what's weird for me about Stoicism is that I'm associated with this thing that I have no ownership over. Like, it's not mine.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's an obligation that comes with it in a way that if I had invented it, it would be different.
Yeah.
Or if I was just writing novels, it would be distinct.
Yeah.
So I kind of think about it that way.
I read this quote about envy. I wanted to read you because I think it flows with North Star, that you probably, I may have even got it from you or Billy, but it says envy is inversely correlated with self-examination. The less you know yourself, the more you look to others to get an idea of your worth. But the more you delve into who you are, the less you seek from others, and the disillusion of envy begins. And I feel like you are a lot further down the line than most people when it comes to not. I'd be curious. I don't want to answer for you, but like, because you do the work on yourself and you have a North Star, you have an understanding of where you're trying to go, you're not as worried about like having to measure yourself against others or using others' definitions of success for your own.
Well, I definitely would agree with the idea that the more you know yourself, the less you want to be other people, because you also understand that everything that someone is has costs associated with it too. So you tend, what I think where envy gets us in trouble is that we think that a person is just has these other things and they could be the things that we are. And that's not how it works. There's trade-offs for everything. Yep. And so you see someone, you go, oh, I want what they have, and you don't think about what it took to be that. And I don't just mean the hours in the gym or whatever. Mm-hmm. I mean that you have to turn off parts of your brain to have different parts of your brain on. And so you can't you can't just like pick and choose. You got to totally make the trade. But I don't know. I mean, I definitely feel jealous and envious of people all the time. I just try to remind myself, like, if that, I try to go like, you made choices and you can make different choices if that's actually important. The problem is, again, we want to keep all our choices and then get what they have without making those choices. And I think that's where we get ourselves into trouble, because we're wanting something that's not possible. But I definitely try to remind myself, like, this was all intentional. This is a direction I went in. And if I'm unhappy with that direction, I should change it. But I'm not. What I'm really just trying to do is be greedy.
What do you mean?
Well, you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. You know, you're trying to be like, okay, I made all you're saying like, okay, you love playing the cello and you become a classical musician.
Yeah.
Okay. You love classical music. You love the music, you love the venues, you love the people that love classical music, you love what a small insular world it is, you love how it's respected, etc. This is the world you chose. Okay. You can't then look at a rock star that's selling out a stadium of 70,000 people and go, well, I want that too. You made choices over here. What you're saying is, I want to be the fancy, respected classical musician that had all the things that were possible in the path that I did. And I would like to be over here, this other thing. And that's not how it works. You know, like Emerson has this essay called Compensation, and he's saying that everything has compensations to it. So you pick a smaller world like classical music, and it's smaller, but the compensation is maybe that there's less competition or something like that. And so you made your trade over here, and they made trades over here too. The problem is you're trying to make your trades, get your benefits, and then go, but I also want this thing. And I just go like, especially with peers that I know that have books that have like, I'm writing it about an obscure school of ancient philosophy. Like, there's a ceiling to it. You know, I don't know what that ceiling is, but it's going to by definition be smaller than the ceilings of, say, you mentioned habits generally is a bigger category than Stoicism, right? Yeah. That's a reality. And so why we're running totally different races then. We're playing with totally different material, different instruments, even if we're in the same field. So whether he's selling millions of copies or no copies, it's really of no concern to me, because I made these choices over here. Yeah.
It almost flows with, and I love, because it really made me think about paying the tax.
Yes.
You've written about paying the tax and it's not just like taxes the way you think of taxes. Like, there's a tax on everything. Like,
yes.
We came here, which means we had to get on an airplane.
Yes.
And that was the tax in order to have this amazing experience. And
but also, like, flying in an airplane, the tax is delays, the tax is other people, the tax is having to get there early, you know, the tax is feeling sick after, you know, there's all these things that go along with that thing.
Right.
And Seneca's saying that you got to pay the taxes of life gladly. And it's like, hey, I picked this thing. These are the taxes associated with it. Over here, I'm only seeing the benefits. I'm not really aware of the massive taxes they paid to get there.
Yes.
And if I want those things, I have to be willing to pay those taxes. But also, it's probably not possible for me to do this thing and this thing.
But I think that idea of being willingly and gladly paying the tax of anything you do, instead of just the complaining, because what does the complaining get you? Like, I mean...
Yeah, and I try to, like, a lot of what Stoicism is to me is sort of just these kind of like ways of thinking about the problem that essentially eliminate the problem. It's like, you know, in math, you're like, you line these up and then these variables cancel each other out, and then you're good. Yeah. And it doesn't totally solve the problem, but it makes the problem easier. Yeah. To me, that's a big part of Stoicism. So, like, one of my favorite ones from Marcus Aurelius, and I try to use this logic all the time. He goes, okay, you bump into someone who's like really shameless or awful, and you go, okay, is a world without shameless or awful people possible? Obviously, no. Like, it's like, okay, so a certain percentage of people are going to be that person. You've now met one of those people. This shouldn't surprise you. This is just how it goes. Yeah. And so, like, I think about this. It's like, okay, I wrote a book, and then it gets some really nasty review. Was it possible for me to write a book and get 0 negative reviews? Of course not, right? Like that would be delusional and entitled. So this is one of those. Like there was going to be 1 out of 100. There's going to be 10 out of 100.
Yeah.
Maybe it's going to be 99 out of 100. You don't know the numbers, but like the idea is like this is one of a percentage. And you go, okay, so then I'm just going to accept it because I know this thing is going to exist theoretically. And now practically I've met one of those. This makes sense. This checks out, you know? And so I try to, is this, when I'm flying, okay. Most of the time your flights are going to be on time. It's going to go seamlessly, but some of them are going to be a little bit delayed. And then probably 1 out of 50 is going to be extremely delayed. This is the extremely delayed one. It just is what it is. Like it doesn't matter if you think it's because X, Y, or Z is happening. It doesn't matter that you just had one of these. It doesn't matter that you really need to get where you're going.
Yeah.
It was impossible that you would fly 50 times without one of them being extremely delayed. This is one of those things. And then, look, it doesn't magically take the thing away. You still have to sit there, still have to pay the tax, whatever. But it does take away this thing we add on top of our problems, which is this is an aberration. This is shitty. This is unexpected. This is unfair. This is a surprise. And you kind of remove that, and then you can calm down a little bit.
How hard is it for you to do that in the moment?
Oh, it's very hard. It's always hard, but I try. I think I'm better at it, and I think I'm quicker at getting there than I was before.
Yeah.
And I think I do things less that afterwards, had I gotten to this place, I wouldn't have done. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's like yelling at this person doesn't make the plane come any faster. So like, let's just eliminate that as one of the options.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think I'm even if I still have the feelings, I think I'm better at identifying that I'm having the feeling, and then at the very least not acting on said feeling.
Yeah. Shifting back to some of the cool thing about your book, again, talking to Billy about this earlier, was the fact that it's so obvious that you are having to read constantly to come up with the stories. But one of the ones in the sporting world, which is in my background, is on Greg Popovich.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of leaders creating more leaders, and in his case, building a coaching tree. Coach Walsh, another one. Bill Walsh was good at that. The Score Takes Care of Itself is another good book, but he was known to call coaches, general managers, to get his coaches head coaching jobs right when they were ready. But Popovich, like the stats on this were crazy. Not only has he won 5 titles, but like a third of the league,
it's insane,
coaches either played for him or were on his staff, and they've won a bunch of titles in itself. And so if we broaden this to a leadership perspective, which is where I really like to focus on, how do we get better at making it a goal to build a tree, to build a forest, as Popovich has, of more leaders out in the world?
Well, it's funny. I was talking to R.C. Buford, who's he was the GM of the Spurs for all their championships, and now he's the CEO of the organization. And I was saying, hey, I'm going to do this chapter on Greg Popovich and his coaching tree because I think it's fascinating. Because there are other coaches. Bill Walsh has a good coaching tree. Belichick has a good coaching tree. But what's interesting, I think, especially about Popovich, is how diverse it is. And by that, I don't mean men, women, black, white. It's just very different kinds of coaches. Like there's one version of your coaching tree where you're just making replicas of yourself.
Yep.
And what's interesting about Popovich is just how wildly different all the coaches are. He just seems to like have a good eye for talent, and then he helps that talent become whatever it's capable of being, as opposed to this is the Popovich system, and you come in and you come out with the Popovich stamp of approval. But anyways, I was talking to R.C. Buford about this, and he was like, yeah, of course, he has a great coaching tree. But he was kind of like, you're not seeing the full picture. He was like, we have a good coaching tree. And by that, he was like, he started bragging to me about like what their social media employees had gone on to do. And like, he was like, it's an organizational thing, that it's not just, hey, you come in as a coach here, we put you through the Spurs coaching clinic, and then you'll get poached by someone. They were like, no, we see, there was almost like a self-awareness about like San Antonio probably not being the end point on many people's journeys, but that you come here, we teach you a bunch of things, you teach us a bunch of things, and then wherever you want to end up going, we'll support you.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really interesting, the irony is a shocking amount of players have stayed in San Antonio. That's where they chose to retire, which is not, if you made hundreds of millions of dollars playing in the NBA, that's not where you think you would go. Yeah. But so many players have stuck around San Antonio that the Spurs, their new practice facility, has an alumni locker room.
Wow.
And you're like, oh, okay, so this is really an organizational value here, that people come in, and once they come in, they're part of the universe indefinitely. And that's also interesting. Some of the coaches have done players and coaches have done multiple tours. So they've gone somewhere else, it's not worked out, or worked out for a while, then they got fired, and then they spent a year in San Antonio scouting or as an assistant coach, and then they went and got their next job. So I just love the idea of going like, hey, we are this organization and we want to win and we want to do well. But also we're here for people, and our job is to make the people who come through here better. Yeah. And that in the end helps us and it helps them. And so, yeah, I think at the end of your career, obviously you're going to be proud of however high you got promoted, whatever you accomplished. But I think you're also going to be thinking, did I have a wider impact than that? And what did the people that I worked for and with, what did they go on to do? Yeah. And I think we also don't talk enough about organizations with really bad coaching trees. So like American Apparel was fascinating because like very few of the people went on to do other things. And I thought that was always very interesting. You know, there's a bunch of people that have worked for Warren Buffett that have gone on to be like extremely successful, right? There's a bunch of hedge fund managers. You track what Trump is fascinating to me because not only did he have a show where he was getting his apprentices, but I mean, he's been in the New York real estate business for decades. There's no like, oh, this guy worked for, like, there's no like actual apprentices, right? And so like, ultimately, I think you measure greatness not just on what the person succeeds, but how good they are at helping, at how replicable their system or their ethics or their strategy is. It says something about it, because if it only worked for you and it only worked one time, how do we know that it wasn't just luck? Yeah. Or that it wasn't like extractive and negative, right? And so I think we shouldn't just judge people based on what they do. We should judge them on their coaching tree. We should also judge them on their lack thereof. Like if you kicked open a door and then shut it behind you, well, what kind of, what kind of trajectory?
It feels like you're trying to do this. I mean, Brent is a New York Times bestselling author. Had him on one of my favorite conversations of the year. Yeah, he was out there freezing.
Did he do it in the mine when he recorded?
He was. Yeah, he was up in the middle. Oh no, he wasn't in the mine, but he was like in one of the guest areas. Billy's got a book coming out. I know, and so it feels like you're being intentional to try to do this yourself.
Yeah, I mean, when I hire people, one of the things I like to ask is like, okay, but what do you really want to do? Because chances are it's not. Well,
you also had your assistant stolen, one of your assistants stolen by Tim Ferriss, right?
I had two of them, actually.
Two of them.
Christo, who was my first researcher, runs Tim's
I just emailed
podcast.
with him. Yeah,
Christo's the best.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think about that all the time. How do you find people and think about what is it that you want to do? And like, look, sometimes a job is just a job. Hey, I'm just paying my kids through college, or I'm, this is what I do, and because my hobby is this thing, and great. Also, but like when you're hiring someone, can you both be on the same page and be clear about what kind of relationship this is going to be? And I just always find when someone says, okay, I'm hired in this position, but what I really want to do is X, or my goal is this or that, then I go, okay, now I know what I want from you, but now it's clear what you want from me, and I can make sure that I'm delivering that, so that our relationship isn't just on what's in your direct deposit every 2 weeks or whatever. It's also what kind of things, when I get invited to something, am I bringing this person or am I bringing this person? When I'm thinking about doing this project, maybe I'm half interested, but I think it'd be really good for this person to be involved with it. Mm-hmm. So when you can be upfront and clear, again, this is why that North Star is so important. When you can be clear about where you're trying to go and what you're trying to do, you can help other people align with that also. Mm-hmm. And look, the way the world works, right? You're probably not going to work at this thing until you retire 30 years from now. Right. So being straight about this being kind of a tour of duty, or an apprenticeship, or a way station on the way to something, allows everyone to be honest and clear, but also like aligned in what they throw your way and don't throw your way.
And I can't imagine how motivating that is for them, for the other person, knowing like my boss wants to help me get there. Along the way, we're going to do good work, and I'm going to do the work that he's paying me to do. But along the way, he knows like we're both like aligned, and that's just so rare. I feel like that is what isn't. People have these ambitions or these ideas, but are afraid to tell somebody else. It's better just to get it out there, and then you can help each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, my boss is threatened by this, so I have to hide it, or I have to not tell them, or I think that they're going to do it anyway, so you might as well be aligned by it, right? To me, that's
how did Robert Greene help you with that?
Well, I don't know if I knew I wanted to be a writer just yet, but I knew I loved books and I wanted to learn about how books worked. It's funny, I was Robert connected me with his agent, but his agent passed on me. So that was funny. But no, I mean, Robert knew I wanted to be a writer. And at some point, me understanding that I wanted to be a writer allowed the relationship to operate right, because then what he was paying me was more than fair, and he was a great boss, but it allowed me to go, all this is secondary to what I'm actually trying to get out of this, mm-hmm. which is to like figure out how this stuff works. Mm-hmm. And so I always saw it as like, sure, I'm being paid to do this, bucket of duties, but my actual compensation is that once I finish those things, if there's a little time left, I can be like, hey, how does this work? Or, hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
Or, and that's where I think he gave me such a huge leg up, is that when I came time to write my first book, I already knew how books worked. Yeah. Like I wasn't trying to figure that out from scratch.
If somebody wants to work with someone else, what do you think is the best way to reach out cold, or what's the, I mean, I'm curious what the guy said to you to earn the jobs that they got. 'Cause I think a lot of people don't know how to do this really well, and so
it's really hard.
They throw up on people, and then it doesn't work out.
No, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, you get these emails, and they go, "Hey, like I'll work for you for free," or people say, "I'll do anything."
Right.
Which seems helpful, except if you're a busy person, I don't have a need of anything. I don't have anything that needs to be done. I have specific things that need to be done, or I have things that I don't know that I need to be done. So when someone just says like, "I'll do anything," what they're saying is, I think when you just send these unsolicited emails and you go, "Hey, I want to like be your mentee, or I'll be your unpaid apprentice or something," what you're saying is, first off, you're saying like there's some level of desperation, right? Yeah. You always want to be chosen as opposed to approached. But they're saying like, I don't know you, or you don't know me, but I want you to choose me out of all the other people and find something for me to do that I may or may not be able to do. But like you're basically presenting them the problem of you and saying, figure this out. Yeah. Whereas if you're able to go, hey, I saw you're working on this thing. Here's 3 ideas I had, or here's 3 things that I know how to do that I noticed you're not doing. I'm a little out of touch these days, so I'm trying to think of what things would be. But like, let's say you want to be a comedian.
Yep.
And you would see some comedian, you go, hey, I'm good at video editing. I can cut up clips from your, the sets you do on the road, and I'm really good at putting them on TikTok or whatever. So if you're a 40-something-year-old comedian, you don't know shit about TikTok.
Yeah.
And that seems like, okay, yeah. The downside of this is minimal, and the upside is potentially high. Yeah. And it's also concrete, and it's contained. Yeah. This is very different than like, hey, can I come live in your house, and do X, Y, or Z, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So I think it's finding very contained, very specific things that you have taught yourself to do that would allow you entry into a person's life or world, that if you are trustworthy, consistent, hardworking, a fast learner, the opportunities for expansion get pretty big pretty quickly.
Specificity is such a big thing with reaching out. Like,
Yes.
be specific with in your praise. Because like, say you're amazing isn't really that helpful. But if you say you're really good at this specific thing, that's good in praising. And I think it's also good when you're going to ask for something or offer something up, because you don't want to create more homework for the person. Like, oh God, I have to think of something, like delete, as opposed to saying that I'm specifically this. Hey, one thing recently that I really admire you for is your willingness, and you write a lot about it in Right Thing Right Now, but you've been practicing it long before this book came out, is your willingness to speak up. And in the book, you talk about making good trouble. And there's a story about Arthur Ashe, who seemed, I hadn't studied a lot, I've just seen stuff on TV. He seemed very soft-spoken and quiet, and he called his dad in the book you write about, saying, Dad, I think I might get arrested tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then he did. And so, but this idea of making good trouble is like, it's our duty as leaders, as good people, and as people who do the right thing at the right time, to speak up. And you lose fans over this all the time. Like, I think you still gain more from it. But I'm curious just your overall thought process on, like, I'm going to cause some trouble and I'm going to lose some people, but I'm still doing it because it's the right thing.
Yeah, I think you got to, I think a platform is a responsibility. And if you're responsible, like, think about what this goes back to the idea of North Star. So if you got in this to have like large numbers of fans, well, then you're never going to say or do things that cost you fans. And then you don't really have the fans, they have you, right? And so that can kind of be the trap that people get into. So, and we see this, I think, in perhaps a more relatable way in the corporate world, is like, someone goes like, I want to be successful and I want to make a difference, but I can only make a difference like once I'm important and powerful. So I got to like go along to get along. And so, the person who works for 30 years to work their way up the ranks is telling themselves all the while, when I'm CEO or when I'm director or when I'm whatever, then I'm going to say something. But you're not, because you're actually, you think you're going to get to a place where you become where you become less risk averse, but you actually become more risk averse because you have more to lose. Yeah. And so you have to kind of, it's this balance of like, sure, if you speak up on every single thing and you seek out every divisive issue, like, you're never gonna, you're just gonna alienate people and it's not gonna connect. And also you're not doing like the core thing that you actually do. At the same time, if you're not making decisions or you're not speaking up about things that you think are important, or talking about things that you think are meaningful or interesting to you, like even just artistically, like, hey, I don't want to write a song like this because it's not as popular as this. Well, now you've been captured by the audience. Yep. And that's, I think, a creative form of death, but it's also like, I think, it deprives the world of good stuff, but then also like the energy we need to like fix and solve problems. So I just try to think about, like, okay, there's this thing happening, or this thing I feel like needs to be talked about. Is if I don't say something, will someone else do it? Okay, maybe I don't need to do it. But if no one else is doing it, then it probably does fall on you. And so you got to think about, how do you want to use the platform? How do you want to use the authority you have? I think you see this in politics. It's very easy to go like, well, why don't these people in Washington, it's because they're afraid of they're not getting reelected. And that's really easy to say. But when was the last time you said anything that jeopardized your position or but there is this tendency to go, well, this is the people above me's level of shit. Yeah. Like I'm a congressman, this is a senator problem, or I'm a senator, this is a president problem. Yeah. And that's how you get to a place where nobody does anything about it.
Yeah. Speaking of somebody who was willing to do that and do the right thing, I was embarrassed that I knew so little about President Truman. Yeah. And he's a primary character in this book.
He's one of my favorite presidents.
I mean, I think I would be curious just to hear from you, to share more about all of the, I mean, I was looking at the books in the bookstore, all the books on Truman,
Yeah.
McCullough, and all that. And I love McCullough's book on the Wright brothers. So I'm like, that's got to be the next
You got to
one.
read the Truman book.
Yeah,
It's
Truman's
incredible.
got to be the next one. But like, share just a little bit more about this guy, because I think a lot of us, like our age, don't know a lot about him and all he stood for and how he was so impactful as a leader.
Yeah, I mean, just an incredible example of an ordinary person doing extraordinary things.
Yeah.
You know, you have this. It's like the American story. This sort of Midwestern child of farmers becomes the president of the United States. I think the last president not to go to college, but had self-educated himself to the degree where he knew more about history than many of the sort of experts that were consulting with him. But he just had this. He had these core values. Many of them happen to be rooted in the sort of classical virtues I'm talking about in the books. But he just had this sense that he was obligated by the Constitution. He was obligated by his sort of human decency to do certain things and not do certain things. And just because other people were getting away with those things didn't mean they were okay. Just because no one was watching didn't mean they were okay. And then just because they were, you know, politically damaging didn't mean he could turn away from them either, right? So you have this guy who had this in a time of immense political corruption, decides to basically be an honest broker, which itself was the reason we have a presidential pension is because people were horrified to find out that basically the president of the United States was broke, having left office.
Yeah.
And, but that didn't bother Truman, right? Like it seemed to bother other people more than Truman. Truman, at the end, turns down the Congressional Medal of Honor because he's like, it's only for, it was the thing he wanted more than, it was like the one thing in life that he wished he could have gotten that he didn't get. And when they were going to make an exception and give it to him, he was like, no, my whole life is about not being the exception. And so it's just an incredible man. And I wanted to, like, the book is about justice, but I wanted to bring justice down from this idea of like, well, what we do for other people and more like how we comport ourselves. And Truman to me was just a great example of a person with a strong moral code that sort of guided him in very difficult circumstances. This is what I will do. This is what I won't do. And nothing can shift me from that. And that kind of confidence and security to me is very inspiring.
Values aren't really real until like you're willing to live up to them when that probably costs you something.
Yeah, they say it's not a principle unless it costs you money.
Yeah, like it seems like that those stories like that are what's inspiring to say like this is the way to be, right? This is the way, and he did it when everybody else was really corrupt. He could have easily done it. He even like went overboard to not be corrupt when they were parceling out the land and giving the money for certain amounts of land that they cut into, and he still didn't take the money even though he rightly deserved it and his mom did, I believe, right? So like there's so much that others were doing that he's like, I'm just not going to go there.
Yeah, we tend, like when we think of presidents or when we think of generals, we go, oh, can you believe they pulled off this incredible victory or they did this incredible thing? And it's usually like an outward accomplishment. And these are very awe-inspiring things. What I love about Truman and the stories that I tried to tell in this book that I think we don't do enough to celebrate is a moment like, Truman watching everyone else steal millions of dollars, get away with it, and keep paying off his bankruptcy debts all the way through his senatorial career. Or, watching his mother's farm get sold in foreclosure, meanwhile, the sort of crime syndicate is running politics in his time and everyone is getting rich as a result. And him just deciding not to do that. Like, it doesn't matter that everyone else is doing it. I'm not going to. And those things to me are just like awe-inspiring on a different level when somebody sort of refuses to do a thing that's very much in their self-interest. But like I tell the story of this guy Regulus in the book, who's this Roman general who is taken prisoner, and then he's released to go back to Rome to negotiate this prisoner exchange. But he has to promise that if he doesn't succeed, he'll come back. And he fails and he comes back. and
be a prisoner.
Yeah, to be sentenced to death effectively.
Yeah.
And he's asked, why? This doesn't make any sense. Like, obviously the promise was done under duress, like, you're free, these are bad people, why? And he basically says, like, look, if I go back, I alone will suffer. But he says, if I don't go back, all the Romans will suffer, because you won't be able to trust our diplomatic, exchanges. And so, we think like, hey, well, everyone's getting away with it. I'll break the rules, or this is just this one instance. It doesn't matter. But there's a cost societally. There's a cost to the public trust. And I think I'm just really inspired when you see people do a thing that's like not good for them, but good for the world. Another example that's not in the book, but I love, I think almost 10 years ago, CVS just decides to stop selling cigarettes. And this cost them like something like $1 billion a year in revenue. And their argument was like, look, obviously cigarettes are bad for the world. We're supposed to be a health company.
Yeah.
Like, why are we selling cigarettes? But everyone else is selling cigarettes. Like, I'll give you an example. I own this little grocery store up the street, and I'd always heard that. And by the way, the crazy thing was cigarettes, that you would think, okay, so people just buy the cigarettes from someone else, right? Like, what is actually being accomplished here? Nothing. Well, it turns out actually cigarette sales, like, nationally go down because it's just harder to get cigarettes, so people smoke less. It's just great.
Yeah.
So they make a singular decision that actually does have a positive impact. But when you're evaluating the CVS stock, no one's like, well, let's invest more in CVS because they help the world, right?
Right.
But we own this little grocery store up the street that has been in business for like 60 or 70 years. And is it more? No, it's like 70 years. Anyways, I remember that decision, and we had partners in the business at first. And so I was like, guys, what are we, like, you own a gym. I write about this stuff. I don't want to sell cigarettes. This is gross. And they're like, oh yeah, we totally agree. Let's get rid of them. And then I come back, a little while later, and the cigarettes are still there. And I go, I thought we were getting rid of the cigarettes, guys. And they go, we were going to, but it's like the number 2 seller in the store, like, every day. And it wasn't until those partners exited the business that my wife and I had to make this decision of like, okay, it's one thing to go like, cigarettes are bad. We don't want to sell cigarettes. No one should really be smoking. And another to say, I will pay X number of dollars per month to not be in the cigarette. So you're not, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're
it's a
having,
cost. I mean, it's a legitimate cost.
Yeah. And you're not just saying, hey, I don't like this thing. You're saying, I will pay. I'm effectively lighting this much money on fire to not do it. And it's easier. It's easier to say than to do. And then you do it. And what's funny is, like, then it just goes away and you just don't think about it. But it's there. The cost of it is there. You can imagine Truman just as he's paying to send his daughter to school or thinking about how he's going to fund his retirement. He's like, man.
Yeah.
And any one of these decisions along the way would have made this whole thing go away from me.
And it's like,
so it's tough.
Nobody would know. And you write about keeping your hands clean. You discuss the difference between someone like in the world of golf, because this is top of mind too. Because Rory McIlroy, who you write about in the book, I know he's a fan of yours. Not tragically, but it was a rough day.
Yes.
Rough day. He lost. There's this guy from Ohio State named Neil Shipley. He was a low am, and he called a penalty on himself on like Thursday or Friday when nobody would have ever known about it.
Yes.
And I love examples of the golfers like Rory and Neil Shipley, and the opposite of the other end of that spectrum is a Patrick Reed, which you write about. And so how do you take that beyond the world of golf of like, I'm going to call a penalty on myself. I'm going to keep my hands clean of whatever it is that I could get, and nobody would ever know, but I would know, and that's enough.
Well, an obvious example would be like, you're a contractor and you quote someone, this amount because the materials cost is X. Mm-hmm. Now it turns out materials are 22% less than you thought. Do you let the client know, or do you pocket an extra 22% on the job?
Yep.
one argument is it's totally your money and they knew it's an estimate. They knew what they were getting into. And then the other is that, what kind of, is that the kind of person you want to be? And you got to decide. Yeah. And I hope it doesn't come off as in the book as me saying like, I'm always making these decisions and I effortlessly do it. No, but I'm saying that this is what justice is. Justice isn't, legally or not, was this the right thing to do or not? Like, did you fight for this, this civil rights issue? Obviously, this is all important. But at another level, it's the decision to call a penalty on yourself when you're playing a casual round of golf, because that's the kind of person that you are. Yeah. And what that should have the effect of doing is building the muscle where you say, hey, I told you it was going to be, $2,000. It's actually coming in at $1,500. So by the way, I'm going to rectify that on the invoice. Whoa, cool. And those are the moments that really, I think, make life wonderful when you see people do stuff like that.
One of the things too you read about is just being kind and like, let's be more kind. And I think back to, we were in Ojai and I was having breakfast with you and Sam. I remember I called my wife after that trip, after that breakfast, and I said, they were just very down to earth and kind. That was the word I actually used. I remember both you guys were just kind of chill. We were hanging out. You're still pretty well known at the time, but obviously more now. And I just thought that idea of, it sounds basic, sounds fundamental, but fundamentals I think are really important. Like in athletics they are, but just this fundamental idea of choosing to be a kind person to all that you see. And that's a right thing right now type of idea as well.
You do a lot of talking, right?
Yeah.
Like speaks. So sometimes when I'm like, there's usually like, they'll send someone, they come and get you, they bring you have these little like one-off conversations with like, it's very friendly, but you'll never see this person again in your life. Right. Yeah. And I always, sometimes when I'm sitting there, I'll go like, so what's like the worst speaker you've ever had to deal with? I'm always like fascinated with that, right?
Oh yeah.
And like I want to, and it like I take two things from it. One, it's always interesting. Two, I can relate to the thing that the person was doing. It makes sense to me. Yeah. But it reminds you that like what they thought and then the impact of the decision or the way that they were acting on other people is often very different. So they were telling me about this one speaker. I just gave a talk maybe 2 weekends ago, and they were telling me about the speaker who I know, who I had some feelings about. So it didn't surprise me, but the person was basically like, hey, this is I'm talking from this time to this time. I have like a hard out at 9:50 or something. They're doing the thing. They're doing like a signing at the end. And then at 9:50, they just got up and walked away. Like they weren't like, hey, I'm wrapping up. Like, hey, they're just like punched out and walked away, even though there's like a bunch of people waiting. Yeah. And so like on the one hand, I try to be charitable. Maybe this guy had to run to a flight or whatever. But it also struck me as just a person who's living in a world where their decisions don't have consequences for other people. Yeah. And so you kind of you just kind of think about like how do you want to come off to other people, and how do you treat people who you will probably never see again? Yeah. And who in many cases you have a kind of power differential between. Yep. And you can get away with it, but that doesn't mean that that's how the person that you want to be.
That measure of like how you treat those who will never you'll never see again. They won't be able to do anything for you. Like the AV guys, right? Yes. Like I love bonding with the AV guys. They're the best. You know what I mean? Like I'm super grateful for them and try to make their life easier with all my stuff. But like those guys, the drivers, like everybody in between, like they're just trying to do a good job. Like let's try to make it pleasant. Let's try to be kind. Let's try to leave them better than we found them. Yes. It's not really that hard.
No, it's not that hard. And it's like a muscle, because you never know when that person isn't the kind of person that you think they are, right? So like you think it's a driver, but it's actually like someone from the event or right. So like it's also just like, it's a bad strategy to treat people poorly, because you never know, right? I think Tim Ferriss said to me, he's like, you should treat everyone you meet as if they can put you on the front page of the New York Times, because inevitably you will meet that person at some point. Yeah. And you don't know. You don't know that, oh, you talk to this person and they talk to this person and they talk to this person. And that's why this thing is happening for you.
Yeah.
And so, it's tough though when you're busy and you're tired and you're stressed and you have done this exact same thing 1,000 times and you know it better. And here's some person, and so being kind is easy, but it's also not easy. It requires the conscious. Like there was a story I have in the book about Truman where he calls someone who'd worked for Roosevelt for like 12 years into the office, and he asks him a bunch of questions, and then he goes, "Hey, I just want to thank you for everything you're doing." And the guy's leaving, and he looks very different, and someone says, "What just happened?" And he goes, "Just the most extraordinary thing of my life just happened. The president just said thank you to me." And so for Truman that was normal, but what that meant is that for 12 years working for FDR, amidst incredible difficulty and stress, the president had never acknowledged this person's contributions.
Wow. 10 years from the obstacle is the way.
Yeah, that's nuts.
That's crazy. You've kind of created a movement of Stoicism, starting with that book and now all of the ones that have followed. How does that feel, man? It's been a decade worth of now getting millions and millions of people into Stoicism that started 10 years ago from that book.
Well, it's very weird. I'm doing like a 10-year anniversary edition of it.
Yeah.
And so the book is done. So I was just submitting the last changes to it. But then they were like, so you're going to re-record the audiobook. And I was like, why would I re-record it? I would just record the new parts. You can just edit them in. That's and they were like, have you listened to this? And I listened to it. And I'm like, who is this person? My voice has changed. 10 years of travel and work and podcasts and children. And I sound like a kid and I don't sound like a kid, And
Is that weird? To listen to your own
you're
voice.
like, it's like I'm 10 years older.
Yeah.
And I've been through some shit in the 10 years. So it feels, it's surreal. It's very surreal. It doesn't, it feels like much longer than 10 years and much shorter than 10 years at the same time.
Do you set big goals?
I don't set any goals.
Any goal? No goals.
None.
So there's no way of thinking I set this big, hairy, audacious goal 10 years ago and look at this. I am curious about your goal setting process. If you don't set any, then what is your mindset is do the work today and then the next day and the next day, or how do you think about it?
Yeah. I was trying to write a book about Stoic philosophy.
Yeah.
And I did that.
Yeah.
And then I had an idea for another book. And so I did that. And then I had an idea, the idea, I think it would have been, if I had all this in mind, I think that would have been so delusional as to be worthy of being institutionalized. It was crazy, right?
Yes.
And that wasn't my conception at all. I was just trying to do the thing in front of me as well as I could do it. And I try to think about it that way. So yeah, I don't really have goals.
What about moving forward? What's next? What do you want to do next?
I have, so this was a 4-book series.
Right.
So maybe you could call that some goals in that I made a commitment to do these things.
Yeah.
But I don't really see that as a goal. And there's not, to me, a goal. The problem with most goals is that most goals are attached to things that are outside of your control.
Yep.
So most people's goals are
results based.
but not even results based in that writing a book is results based.
Sure. Yeah.
But being number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list is a result that is outside of your control. Right. Being the highest paid salesperson in your company is outside of your control. Being a great salesperson is in your control. Right. And so a lot of times our goals are rooted in things that are outcome specific, and that outcome is largely based on what other people are going to say or think or do. So I don't really have any of those goals. I sold a 4-book series, so I was like, I'm going to do these 4 books and I'm going to try to do them in 4 years. It's going to be 5 or 6, but so you could call that a goal in that I have things that I'm engaged in doing, but whether I do them or not is really a matter of individual will and commitment, as opposed to something that requires approval or winning or something like that.
Yeah.
So almost, if I have any goals, they're all in that sense.
I'm going to get up and I'm going to write
Yeah,
tomorrow,
I said
the next
I was
day.
going to go running tomorrow, and I was going to work on this chapter, and so that's tomorrow.
Yeah. And I think, do you think confidence is built through keeping promises to yourself?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Uh-huh.
you said, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to run. I'm going to write. And then you do it. And I think consistency, which you're one of the most consistent guys out there, that day after day, it's like not that sexy,
Yes.
but it's very effective.
Well, I tell the story in the book about this poet named Danielle de Prima, who was sort of one of the beats, and she's at this party early in her career, and she gets it to leave. You know, Allen Ginsberg is there, and Jack Kerouac is there, all these fancy people, and she gets it to leave. She says, "I got to go pick up my kid from the babysitters or whatever." And Jack Kerouac says, "What? You know, you got to forget about the babysitter if you're going to make it as a writer." And she says, "No, like I gave the babysitter my word. I have to keep my word." And to her, the idea was that if she said, "Hey, I'm going to be home and pick up my kid at 9," and she didn't do it, she broke that word because she wanted to party or whatever. That's a transgression, but it's setting in motion the transgression the next day of, well, I said I was going to work on this poem, but why? You know?
Yeah.
So keeping your word to others is similar or is part and parcel of keeping your word to yourself, and vice versa. I do what I say.
Yep.
I consistently do X, Y, or Z. That's consistently what I do. And I think that's what matters is the sort of day-to-day keeping of promises, versus the Herculean 2-month sprint to finish this thing that you procrastinated on over and over and over and over again. Like it's, hey, I've got, a month to cut 20 pounds is different than like the discipline of the day-to-day, not putting on the 20 pounds.
Yeah, no doubt. Before we run, can you tell me the story of this table?
Oh, so this table is Joan Didion's table, the novelist. We're both from Sacramento, and it was sold at an auction. So I needed a table for the podcast studio, and I couldn't figure out what I was looking at all these tables, I couldn't figure, and then I saw this was at an auction, and I bought it, and so are the chairs. And I have a similar chair in my office that I write in every day. I just kind of like objects with history in them. They get me excited. So I kind of it's maybe one of my only vices is that I like collect historically significant things. And I think the goal, I haven't decided when, but and I'm saying it so I have to hold myself accountable to it. At some point, I'm going to resell the table. So she sold her estate. She left a bunch of these things to charity. They did it, and then it went to, I think, Parkinson's research or something. I've had all these amazing people, like Admiral McRaven has sat at this table, and artists and writers and leaders have sat at this table. So like it was Joan Didion's table, but now all these other people have sat in it. So I'll probably resell it and then donate the money at some point. But for now, it's just like a. Have you seen this thing called Significant Objects?
No.
This guy named Rob Walker started it, and it's just an art project, but it sort of goes to this point. Basically, he would like buy like a random piece of junk on eBay, and then he would have a writer write a story about that thing, and then they would resell the item, and it was worth more because there was a story about it.
Yeah.
And so things are worthless, and then they become worth something because of the interactions, or like this is just a crappy old table that if you bought it at a garage sale would be like $100, but because it's Joan Didion's table, it's worth thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And then now that all these other people have sat at it, becomes a significant object in these different ways, right?
Yeah.
And so I've always loved that art project, and then that's how it's how I rationalize spending money on things that are rare or unusual or whatever.
Well, it's so cool to be here, man.
Yeah,
we could have done it. Awesome. We could have done this on Zoom, but
this is way better.
So much better to come here and get to experience the bookstore and be in here. Right thing, right now. I mean, it's Billy and I were just talking about. It's like they get a little bit longer and a little bit better.
The
a little
books?
bit longer and a little bit better.
They definitely are.
Yeah.
They definitely
And
do.
I think but there's something to be said for that. Like because if you're reading all the time, you're just going to have more stuff in your head to use and more stories to tell.
Yes, although like there is, I don't know. I go back and forth. Like when I was rereading Obstacle to do this thing, I'm like, it's so short and tight.
Yeah.
But is it short and tight because you're leaving things out? That's the tricky question. So I am noticing they're getting longer. I go either way on whether it's a positive or a negative development.
Yeah. Is it going to be that different? Like how different will it be?
For Obstacle, it has like a new forward, and then I fixed some things, and then there were other things that like I've read more about the stories in the book. I'm like, oh, this, like I want to add this little part. So it's just like little like
be better.
It should be better. And then there was just some stuff that didn't hold up as well as I wanted, and then it's like little things here or there is all.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for having us, man.
Yeah,
This is
thanks for
amazing.
having me.
I really appreciate it, man. This is cool.
Of course.
Thank you so much, dude.